What's up, everybody? I'm Ramón Torres, the Educator at School Your Brain, and today I'm going to share with you my classroom rule. That's right, I said classroom rule, not rules, because I only have one rule, and I'm going to show you a presentation about that rule that I share with my students. And I'd like to hear your comments in the section below if you have any feedback. See if you can come up with any flaws. The reason why I have only one rule is because it seems to encompass all the rules that we try to achieve when we're in the classroom, and pretty much why we create rules in the first place. The other thing I'm going to share with you is a link, which I'll put in the description below, which will take you to a document that I created which supports my rule. You can use this throughout the whole school year anytime a student does an action that violates the rule. And I like to call it a consequence paper. What motivated me to do this was the fact that I read this book by Karen Pryor called Don't Shoot the Dog. And in that book, they described the fact that you need to reinforce the behaviors you want in the moment. In the moment. You have to do it in the moment. Whether it's something you want it to continue or something you want to cease to exist. It has to be in the moment. Which is why things like detention are unpredictable, and which is also why when you give a kid attention, a lot of times that kid keeps ending up getting more because they're not predictable. It's not tied to the behavior at the specific time that they did that thing that you did not want them to do. So if you want some more information about the idea of reinforcing, how to do classroom management the right way, hit like, hit subscribe, leave a comment below. Let me know that that's what you want to hear about, and I can give you the details and what I learned from that book and how I applied it in my classroom, and some of the things that I'm still working on from that book. This is my rule, and this is actually what I share with my students, this presentation here. So we have one rule in this classroom: nurture learning and respect for yourself and others. Yes, nurture learning and respect for yourself and others. That is the only rule we're going to follow in this classroom. I don't care what you do. You can do anything you want. But it should not violate this rule. Because remember, the fact is, you can always have freedom of choice, right? You always have the freedom to do whatever you want. The only thing is, you can't choose your consequences. So don't forget that. You can do whatever you want, but you can't choose the consequences that are going to be tied to the behaviors you choose to do. So you can use this rule as a compass. If you are thinking about doing something in this classroom, you should ask yourself, is this action, is this behavior going to nurture learning and respect for myself and for the others in my classroom? If the answer is no, then you should not do that behavior. And if you can't determine or you can't figure it out on your own and you decide to do it, then guess what? I'm going to help you out. I have something that's called a consequence paper. And if you violate the rule, meaning you didn't nurture learning and respect for yourself and others, I'm going to give you a consequence paper where you're going to fill it out on the spot. And if you don't fill it out on the spot, there's going to be other consequences, which I'm not going to discuss right now. Just know that there will be other consequences. So it's best to deal with it in the classroom with me, and always to try to nurture learning and respect for yourself and others in the first place. And there you have it. That's pretty much kind of like the idea that I talk to my students about right there with the rule. And now let's get into the consequence paper. If a student breaks the rule, they are going to be working on this consequence paper right here. So there are 4 questions, 1, 2, 3, and 4, that they're going to work on. And make sure that this has to be given to the student at the exact moment that they do the behavior you did not want them to do. And the process should be, you give them a warning. If they don't listen to the warning, you have to give the consequence immediately. Because in the past, like my mistake, I'd be like, pay attention. Then they'll talk again. Didn't I just say pay attention? And then they talk again. Come on, like, we need to pay attention. We need to focus here. So you see what you're doing when you do that is you're basically reinforcing the idea that, okay, the teacher's going to give me 4 warnings before he really means it. That's why you have to condition them to understand that when you start saying those, certain key words, like, this is your warning, and if they don't follow through on that, on your warning, then guess what? They're going to get the consequence. You have to train them. And I know it's difficult because sometimes you don't want to, but you have to train that behavior. Otherwise, in the long run, it's just going to get worse and worse. So you have to draw a clear line. And that's what that does. It draws a clear line. It's important that you ask for the behavior you want and then say, this is your warning, and then pay attention, because if they don't listen, you have to give them the consequence. That's very, very important. As an example, let's just do a walkthrough to see how I would do this. And before I get into the example, let me just point out too that the hardest part about the consequence papers is going to be this: consistency. That's probably the hardest habit to develop, at least in my opinion, is to be consistent, to do this every single day throughout the whole school year. Because just like, anybody, we get, kind of get too comfortable at some point in the year, and we tend to let things slide. So you have to constantly remind yourself, where is this headed? Where is this headed? So that's one of the things I tell myself all the time. Like, if I let this go, if I don't follow my warning system, where I say this is what I want, and then I give them the warning, then I know that it's gonna give a gray area, right? They're not gonna be clear as to my directions, and if I'm being serious or not. So you have to draw that boundary line. That being said, let's walk through one example. Let's say I'm doing a lesson in the classroom. Let's say a student is talking during my presentation. Let's just say, Johnny, you're supposed to be paying attention. Let's listen. Right now we're supposed to be paying attention. We're supposed to be listening only, listening. So, you tell them the behavior you want. And then you say, this is your warning. Done. Next, if Johnny continues to talk, boom. Johnny, here you go. This is your consequence paper. Fill this out. Johnny gets the paper. He has to explain what were the teacher's expectations. And at this point, you're going to hope that they're going to fill out, what you expected them. You told them you're supposed to be paying attention. You're only listening only. That's what the expectations were. Number 2, describe exactly what you did to break the teacher's expectation. And at this point, they got to acknowledge what they did. So after that, right, you give him the warning. He needs to think about now, what did he end up doing, after the warning. So clearly he got this consequence paper because he was continuing to talk. And that's what you need to expect. Some type of explanation that the teacher gave me a warning and I continue to talk anyways with my friend. So they should have an explanation along those lines, like explaining their actions. And it's funny because a lot of times they would just explain like, I didn't do anything. They really feel, a lot of times I get a lot of clueless responses. So let me know in the comments if you try this out and what kind of responses that you get. Okay, number 3, read the classroom rule at the top of the paper. How did your actions violate this rule? So now at this point, you're trying to make them reflect on this class rule, right? Nurture learning and respect for yourself and others. So number 3 is basically saying, by continuing to talk during the lesson, right, they're not going to get the lesson. They're going to not get the information they need. So you want them to be able to explain that somehow, because remember, you want them to be able to nurture their own learning. So they should be talking about their learning, they're not learning, and they should also be talking about they took away from their friends' learning too by continuing the conversation. And then number 4, write down a specific solution that will prevent this behavior from happening again in the future. And then hopefully, so you can see I put some little tips here. You can move your seat, ask for a bathroom, water break. So sometimes they might need to just, they might have, let's say, a 504 plan because, they can't sit still. They can move their seat. So I want them to start being autonomous thinkers. So I want them to be like, man, I'm getting distracted. And I'm not expecting, this behavior to be changed that quickly, but that's the goal, right? We want the kids to be able to make that choice on their own. Like, they get the warning, like, oh man, I got to focus. All right, I'm going to move my seat. Like, that'd be perfect if they can do that. And that's actually one of the things, right, when you get evaluated as a teacher, you want kids to pretty much run the classroom themselves. So they need to be doing the thinking for themselves. And that's what we're trying to build, students that are thinkers, right? We're gonna build students that can do the right decision. And this is why I want them to figure out something that they can do. So my idea is usually move your seat, because if you're talking to your friend, it's better to move your seat. But everybody has different solutions. That's why I want them to figure out what to do. It's whatever choice they want, as long as it supports the classroom rule. And that's the purpose of this, because you want them to be able to bring forth their own ideas, their own thoughts, rather than me lecturing them. Because when you lecture, they're not going to listen to it. It just goes in one ear, out the other, right? And you probably know that from experience already. But pretty much that's it. That's all you have to do. You walk them through these 4 things. But if there's anything that I didn't explain too well, just leave a comment, let me know, and I'll give you some feedback as soon as possible. Don't forget, I'm Ramón Torres, the educator at School Your Brain. If you learned something and you actually enjoyed it, hit the like button, leave a comment, please subscribe, support the growth of this channel so I can continue to make content. And the feedback, like leave comments as to what else, because those gives me ideas as to what to make for future videos. Because remember, the purpose of the channel is to serve you, is to help you out with any problem that you might be facing. And hopefully, if I've already faced that problem and if I have a solution, I want to share that with you. All right, until next time, see you later.